This week we're in the last frontier of Alaska, where we'll explore glaciers on a helicopter, spot some incredible wildlife on an Alaskan cruise, take one of the most beautiful train rides in the world, and along the way explain everything you need to know to craft your own Alaskan adventure using miles and points. We'll cover everything from the best flights and accommodation options, but also how you can book Alaskan cruises and some insane activities all using miles and points. Our journey begins in the picturesque southern town of Ketchikan. Welcome to Alaska. So we've got a lot of fun stuff planned for this trip, but our main goal as always is to inspire you and give you the tools and knowledge you need to go plan a trip like this for yourself. And when it comes to crafting an Alaskan adventure using points, there are a lot of options. So let's start with flights, and then we'll get into accommodations and some of the more unique ways that you can use points on some fun activities. So the first flight option that probably comes to mind for Alaska is Alaska Airlines. And while Alaska Airlines miles are tricky to come by these days, you're actually able to book Alaska Airlines flights through a number of oneworld partners like British Airways and Qatar Airways. We'll get into some of those specific partner examples in a second, but don't worry about those for now. We're gonna start with booking Alaska Airlines flights through Alaska Airlines. And the main reason for that is this is definitely going to be your cheapest option thanks to their distance-based award chart. Lots of programs have something similar to this, but if you're not familiar, instead of the dynamic pricing model that many airlines use, where each individual route is priced differently based on a ton of different variables, a distance-based award chart, like the one that Alaska Airlines uses, breaks the number of points required into categories simply based on the distance of that route. Simple enough, but where you can really use these distance-based award charts to your advantage is pushing the limits of these categories as far as possible. For example, the furthest category on the North American chart would be flights that are over 2,100 miles, which means regardless if it's a 2,101 mile flight or a 5,000 mile flight, it's the same number of points. So Anchorage to Los Angeles, for example, which is just barely in that range at 2,300 miles, is 12,500 points, while a flight from Miami to Anchorage is still just 12,500 points, despite being much further and presumably more expensive. Okay, we're gonna consider that your crash course on distance-based award charts, and I would definitely start there if you can, but like I said, earning Alaska Airlines miles is unfortunately not very easy because of their limited transfer partners, although I will throw in here that depending on when you're watching this, you can hypothetically transfer points to Alaska from American Express by going through Hawaiian Airlines, but that's kind of a temporary loophole that isn't expected to last very long, which is where booking through partner airlines can really be helpful. So going back to our Los Angeles to Anchorage example, which again was 12,500 points through Alaska Airlines, here's that exact same flight through American Airlines for 15,000 miles, here it is through Qatar Airways for 16,000 miles, and here it is through British Airways for 20,000 avios. I know all of these booking options for the exact same flight is a little bit confusing, but the big takeaway here is the flexibility that this gives you when transferring your points. Maybe you only have city points and therefore you can't transfer to Alaska Airlines or British Airways, but you could transfer to Qatar and still book that Alaska Airlines flight through them. So understanding these airline alliances can be really helpful, especially with flights to Alaska. Delta is another great option for flights to Alaska, like this flight from Seattle to Anchorage that you could book for 18,000 points directly through Delta. But knowing that Delta is part of the SkyTeam Alliance, that means that I could instead transfer those points to Virgin Atlantic, who has way more transfer partners than Delta, and book that exact same Delta flight through Virgin Atlantic for just 16,500 points. And lastly, United is another fantastic option when flying to Alaska, and you could book this United flight from Houston to Anchorage for 15,000 miles. But again, since I know that United is part of the Star Alliance, you could instead transfer those points to Star Alliance partner Turkish Airlines and book that exact same United flight for just 10,000 miles, despite the fact that Turkish Airlines obviously does not actually fly to Alaska themselves. And if you want to learn more about these airline alliances, our transfer partner cheat sheet lets you filter by each one and learn which airlines are part of which alliance, so definitely check that out. Okay, I know that was a lot of examples and numbers all at once, but using these airline alliances to your advantage to book flights through partners can give you a lot more flexibility and save you some hard-earned points, but I think we've spent enough time on flights and we still have a lot to cover, including hotels, cruises, and a lot of the fun activities that you can do while you're here in Alaska. So let's head north and get into all that fun stuff. Can we just talk about how beautiful this is? I just picked a random spot on the street to record and it looks like this.
Stunning! Stunning!
It's cold, I sound very sick, but we gotta get you this information. So if your head is still spinning from all of those flight examples, then the good news is that hotels in Alaska are much more simple, mainly because there aren't that many hotel options, at least outside of the major cities. But I actually still found some pretty good examples, and no surprise we're going to start with Hyatt, because in general, Hyatt is going to give you the best redemption value on your points. But I will remind you that Chase is the only bank that transfers to Hyatt, so if you don't have any Chase Ultimate Reward points, then you would want to start with a different loyalty program, which we'll get to in a second. So the best Hyatt example that I found in Alaska, at least in terms of the redemption value, is this Hyatt house in Anchorage, which is 9,000 points per night. And considering that exact same room is $416 per night, that's an incredible redemption value of 4.6 cents per point, which is a really good example of why I recommend you start with Hyatt, because I rarely see a redemption value like that from any other hotel loyalty program. There's also a very similar Category 3 Hyatt place in Fairbanks that is also 9,000 points per night, so if you want to learn more about the World of Hyatt program specifically, I'll reference you to this video. But again, if you're not finding any good options, or maybe you aren't able to transfer your points to Hyatt, then from there I'd move on to Hilton. And you're not going to get nearly as good of a redemption value, but the good news is that you are going to have a lot more hotel options, and you can use their 5th night free benefit to stretch your points a little bit further. So if we booked this Home to Suites in Anchorage, for example, it would be 60,000 points per night. And again, since the 5th night is free on award bookings, that means our total would be 240,000 Hilton points, which remember is the equivalent of 120,000 American Express points, since they transfer at a 1-to-2 ratio. Now, let's be honest, that's still a lot of points for 5 nights, but those same 5 nights would cost $2,300 if paid in cash, so that's still a redemption value of 1.9 cents per point, which for Hilton is really good. Now, from there, I'd move on to Marriott, who is by far going to have the most hotel options in Alaska, like this Spring Hill Suites in Fairbanks, which is available for 27,000 Marriott points per night. And similar to Hilton, they also have that same 5th night free benefit, allowing you to, again, stretch your points a little bit further. So using that 5th night free benefit, you could book 5 nights for 112,000 points. And the good news is that you can transfer points from either American Express or Chase. But that is still a lot of points, so you could also use things like the Marriott Free Night Awards. Just know that you can't combine those with that 5th night free benefit. So at least in terms of the major cities like Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau, you've got a lot of options from these big brands. But in order to really explore Alaska, you've got to get outside of the cities to places like this. And that brings us to some of the more unique ways that you can use miles and points on your Alaskan adventure. So a large part of our adventure is actually on a cruise, which gives you a really unique and relaxing way to see some of the more remote coastal parts of Alaska. And while the redemption values are not going to be that great, you can technically book cruises like this using miles and points, and even if you plan on paying cash, booking through a travel portal like Chase or American Express can earn you a ton of extra perks and points. For example, if we click on the Cruise tab on the Amex travel portal and search for an Alaskan cruise, you'll not only see all of the most popular options from a ton of different cruise lines, but they frequently have different special offers like exclusive discounts or drink packages that I didn't see when I was booking directly through the cruise line themselves. Not to mention the fact that you can earn upwards of 10 points per dollar with some credit cards when booking through their respective travel portals. Now, the cruise section of the Chase travel portal isn't quite as polished in my opinion, but they do have a dedicated concierge number that can help you book cruises. And again, not that it's going to be the best redemption value, but you could cover this cash travel purchase using points. And in the case of Chase, if you have the Sapphire Preferred, you're actually going to get 1.25 cents per point thanks to the 25% boost that you get when booking through Chase. And if you have the Sapphire Reserve, which is the Sapphire Preferred's bigger brother, you're actually going to get a 50% boost, meaning you're getting 1.5 cents per point, which is honestly a better redemption value than you'd get through a lot of hotels. Now, obviously, with cash prices of thousands of dollars, we're talking hundreds of thousands of points, but as always, don't think about miles and points as an all or nothing scenario. You could cover just part of that transaction using points, depending on which cards you have in your wallet, which actually brings us to the final and by far coolest way that you can use points to offset some of those miscellaneous travel expenses, like a helicopter ride. You might be surprised to learn that you can actually use miles and points to book all kinds of activities in a few different ways. For example, back on the Chase travel portal, you can see that there's actually an activities tab, and you just type in your destination and when you plan on being there, there, and it's gonna bring up a long list of fun things that you can do. And you can see that it's not only showing us the cash price, but also the number of points required to entirely cover that purchase. And in my case, since I have the Chase Sapphire Preferred, I'm getting exactly 1.25 cents per point thanks to that 25% boost that I get on that card. And if you have the Venture or Venture X cards, for example, then you can actually cover those transactions at 1 cent per point right within the Capital One Travel portal, even if you didn't book it through them. Obviously not the best redemption value in that case, but you could even cover part of that transaction with points, and in general, it's just gonna give you more flexibility with your points. But even if you're not looking to use points necessarily, you still can be strategic about those large travel transactions and earn yourself a lot of points towards your next adventure. For example, you could go book yourself a fun excursion through Viator, or by simply clicking one button and accessing the Viator site through Rakuten, you could actually earn yourself 10% cash back. And as we talked about in this video all about Rakuten, you can actually convert that into 10 American Express points per dollar spent. And that's on top of the benefits that the credit card that you pay with is already giving you. So if you're gonna be spending some hard-earned cash on activities and excursions anyway, then this is a fantastic way to earn yourself thousands of extra points for very little effort, and a strategy that I cannot recommend enough. And lastly, when it comes to those cash bookings, as always, you have my favorite strategy of putting those known budgeted for travel expenses on a new credit card in order to earn a sign-up bonus. Let's say you wanted to take a cool scenic train ride while you're here in Alaska. Not many ways to book a train ride, at least at a decent redemption value here in Alaska, but you could instead pay for that with cash, maybe book it through the Rakuten shopping portal using the strategy that I just showed you, and put that transaction on a new credit card, helping you meet the minimum spending requirement and earn yourself a huge sign-up bonus towards your next adventure. All right, we've still got a lot to see here in Alaska, so let me know what miles and points tips you're using for your own Alaskan adventure. And as always, if you want to learn more about any of the credit cards that I mentioned in today's video, I'll leave a link down in the description to our top travel credit cards page. And using those links not only allows you to earn the best welcome offers, since we're constantly updating that page, but it also helps support Daily Drop and our mission of helping all of you go out, see the world, and experience life-changing travel. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.